Well, hey everyone, welcome to Ada Bible Church Online. So glad that you're with us here today. If we haven't met, my name is Jake. I serve with small groups and men's ministry at our Cascade campus. And if this is your first time joining with us, I want to give a special welcome to you. So many of you tune in week after week to Ada Bible Church Online, and we're so grateful for your faithfulness. We believe that belonging to a local church family, it's vital for spiritual growth. And it's something that Jesus calls his followers into. So if you're outside the West Michigan area, I would love to invite you to find a local church family near your home. Or if you're here in Grand Rapids, we would love to have you for a weekend service at one of our campuses or help you get connected to a ministry. There's a place at Ada Bible for you, and we would love to meet with you and walk alongside you. If you'd like to find out more about our ministries, or if you'd like to let us know how we can pray for you, you could do that by heading to adabible.info. As we continue on with the service, we have an opportunity to join with Tyler and the team for worship.
Let's worship the Lord together. Just sing this with me. And this is my Father's world, into my listening ears. All nature sings and around me rings the music of the spheres. This is my Father's world. Of skies and seas, his hand the wonders wrought. This is my Father's world. Oh, let me not forget that though the wrong seems off so strong, God is the ruler, yes. And this is my Father's world. The battle is not done. Jesus who died will be satisfied, and earth and heaven be This is my Father's world, wherever I may fare, through desert dry or storm-filled skies, my God is present. Yes, he is. This is my Father's world. Why should my heart be sad? The Lord is King. Let the heavens ring. He reigns. Let the earth be glad. We sing that out. Oh, this is my Father's world. Why should my heart be sad? The Lord is King. Let the heavens ring. He reigns. Let the earth be glad. The Lord is King. The Lord is King. Let the heavens ring. He reigns. Let the earth be glad. Yes.
I was lost, but he brought me. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Who the Son sets free, always free indeed. I'm the child of God. Yes, I am. Free at last, He has ransomed. His grace rests. Why
like children we are, O Lord. Innocent to the truth of the world around us. Struggling to understand things so much bigger and scarier and more complex than we are. Forgive us when we don't understand your ways, when we fail to recognize and reject your blessings, when we lash out because we're in pain or in need, when we forget that our good Father is always there to respond to our distress. Continue to care for us, O God. Nurture us with the tenderness of a mother. Guide us towards that which is kind and good and right, that we might continue to grow and become more like you.
Oh, your mercy never fails me, and all my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. We sing all my life. All my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest night. You are close like no other, and I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. Yes, and all my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. We praise Him for His goodness. Yes. And so, Father God, we thank you for that truth here today. That you as creator, God, so holy, so separate, loves us enough that you stepped down into this earth, became human on our behalf, that you gave your life for us that we might have a relationship with you, being able to call you our Father, our friend, and you call us your beloved children. And so we respond here today with praise in our hearts, gratitude on our lips for your goodness that never leaves us and your love that is never ending. We love you, Jesus. We thank you. We pray this in your precious and holy name. Amen.
I'm just so grateful for this time that we get to worship God together. If you've been around Ada Bible Church for any period of time, you've probably heard us talk about serving. Serving is something that we deeply value here at our church, and we value it for several reasons, and I'll just share two with you today. First, when Jesus teaches his followers how to pray, he tells them to ask that God's kingdom would come on earth as it is in heaven. And when we serve, it's actually a tangible way of doing that. Serving somebody else helps bring the light of God's kingdom into a dark and hurting world. Another reason serving is important is because Jesus modeled this for us himself. In the Gospel of Mark, we're told that Jesus came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Just a personal story about serving in my life. Myself and a handful of other young adults head out to downtown Grand Rapids and serve some food and clothing items to folks in the homeless community. Not only is this a great opportunity to meet some physical needs, but it also opens the door to some great conversations where we get to share the hope and the message of Jesus. This most recent time of serving, there was a gentleman who was wrapping up with his meal, and as he was throwing his stuff away, he began to put socks on his hands. And I walked over to him and just said, hey man, do you not have any gloves? And he just looked at me and shrugged his shoulders and said, no, I don't. In that moment, it just struck me how many things I take for granted that so many people right in our backyard go without every single day. Maybe you'd like to get involved in something like that. Maybe you'd like to serve in a way like that. Well, a great place to start would be adabible.info. There's a tab there called Serve, and there you'll find a list of all of our ministry partners, along with a host of opportunities for you to get involved. Serving is a way for us to follow in the footsteps of Jesus and to bring the light of God's kingdom to a broken world. Not only do we believe in the power of serving, but we also believe in the power of prayer. Maybe right now it's just a difficult season of life for you. Maybe you have a medical procedure coming up or a procedure for a close family member. Maybe there's a real tough decision at work that's coming up and you're not sure which path to take. Or maybe you're just not quite sure why, but you could use some prayer. Well, we would love to pray with you and for you. You can head to adabible.info. There's a tab there called Contact Us. You can let us know there how we can be praying. Prayer is such a powerful tool. God hears our prayers, and we would love to come alongside you with that. Well, now we have an opportunity to hear from Pastor Aaron Buer as he opens the scriptures with us and leads us through part 3 of our series, The Final Week.
Hello, how you doing today? All right, great to see you, and welcome to those of you joining us online in our campuses as well. If you're new, my name's Aaron. I'm one of the teaching pastors, and before I jump into our message today, I want to give you an update about our Ukraine giving. And so if you missed out last week, Pastor Jeff shared with us just our desire as a church to do something to help people that have been impacted by the crisis in Ukraine. And so as he shared, we wanted to do something quick, and we wanted to do something as a church together, something big. And so what we determined to do as a leadership team was to take everything that was given by our church to our general offering last weekend and last week, and give that to churches and ministries who are helping people impacted by the crisis in Ukraine. And so I have the privilege of telling you that last week, all of you gave $916,000. So that is incredible. You know, this is just one of those moments where I'm incredibly proud to be part of this church, and just grateful, so grateful for your generosity and your heart for people in our world. And so while our hearts absolutely break for what's happening in Ukraine, we are just so grateful for the opportunity to give generously to people in need. And so already, our church, we've been able to make gifts to a church in Kiev called Almaz, which if you were with us last week, you got to hear from a pastor from Almaz. They've turned their building into a shelter. Already, we've been able to give to a Bible college in Moldova, a neighboring country, where they've turned their campus, their dorms, and other buildings into a refugee center. And so just keep an eye out on our social media. We'll try to keep you posted on just the different ways that we're able to support churches and ministries who are helping people who have been impacted by the crisis in Ukraine. And if you want to do something else to stay involved here, there is an event tonight, 6 o'clock at Kentwood Community Church. It's a community-wide prayer event. A bunch of churches are coming together, so just thought you might like to know about that and perhaps join that as well. So that's the Ukraine update, and now I want to jump into part 3 of our series called The Final Week, where we're spending some time leading up to Easter in Mark's Gospel, exploring the final week of Jesus' life. And I want to start, this might sound a little weird, but I want to start here. Have you been here lately? Doctor's office? Okay, so think with me, you know, the yearly checkup. You show up, and the first thing they do is, you know, you stand on a scale. And maybe you look, maybe you don't, you know. And then you head back to the room, and they do the thing where they check your blood pressure. Perhaps you had some blood work done. And then comes a conversation with the doctor. Now, I don't know how it goes for you. You might hear some things like, you know, hey, you should consider eating better. You should consider exercising more. You should consider losing some weight. Sometimes it's not a very fun conversation. And a question I have for you is, do you listen to your doctor? I'm just curious. You know, he or she probably an authority figure in your life, probably knows more about your body and medicine than you do, you know. But do you listen? And can I confess that I usually don't listen to my doctor. And I know that sounds terrible, and my doctor's probably watching. He probably attends one of our campuses. But truth be told, I don't know about you, but I don't usually listen to my doctor unless I'm desperate, unless I have a need, if I'm desperate. When I found out that my wife was pregnant with our 5th child, I was ready to listen. Okay, I understand there's a procedure that's going to guarantee that the baby number 5 is the last. You know, then I was ready to listen. When we're in pain, ready to listen. When something scary comes back on a test result, these are the moments where we're ready to listen to our doctors. You see, I want to have a conversation today just about authority and why it is that sometimes we listen, but often we don't. And we're going to be spending our time in a conversation, a tense conversation that happened between Jesus and some of the religious leaders of Israel. And it's a conversation about authority. So just a little background here. We got a picture of the temple complex in Jerusalem. Now, the last week of Jesus' life, everything happens in and around Jerusalem. It's like the whole country has traveled to Jerusalem for a religious festival. It's like everybody's there, and a lot of people are in the temple complex. This was like the dominant feature in Jerusalem. And just looking at the week, the last week of Jesus' life, the events we're going to talk about today happen on Tuesday. And as I mentioned, it's going to be a conversation between these religious leaders and Jesus, and it's about authority. Now, if you're familiar with the Gospels, maybe you grew up in church, maybe these stories aren't new, you know that the religious leaders, they never really listened to Jesus. It's like they don't even have open minds in the slightest. They never really go, okay, wait a second. Should we be listening to this guy? And, where does he come from? And maybe he does have authority in our lives. No, they're never actually open to that. And the question is, why? I mean, really. This group, they're highly educated. They know the scriptures. If anyone should have been listening and recognized who Jesus actually was, it should have been this group. But they're totally blinded. Their minds are closed. They're never in a position to actually hear the words of Jesus openly with curiosity. Why? Why is that? I think this is a really important question for us today. Why aren't they listening? Because you know what? A lot of us have been followers of Jesus, Christians for years, perhaps even decades, and we have moments where we don't listen to the voice of Jesus. Maybe you can think of a moment last week where you just didn't listen. And perhaps you're somebody that's stuck in that pattern. It's like you want to listen to Jesus, you mean to listen to Jesus, but over and over again in this particular area of your life, you just keep ignoring him, and it's so frustrating. This might be one of the greatest sources of frustration in your life. Why is it that I don't actually listen to him? And you might be facing a decision in your life, and honest truth is you're planning to ignore the voice of Jesus. Question, why? Why is it that we do this? Why do we sometimes listen and often we don't? And I think what we're going to discover today is that some of the same reasons that these religious leaders didn't listen to Jesus' words are the very same reasons that we don't today. And so my hope for today, for our conversation, my hope is that you might discover some of the things that are holding you back from really opening your heart, really listening to Jesus. My hope is that some of us might get unstuck in our lives. And so what we're going to do is we're going to uncover in this story 3 reasons why they couldn't listen to Jesus, and 3 reasons why we often don't listen to Jesus. So if you want to follow along, Mark chapter 11 is where we're going to start out. And the deal is, like I said, it's Tuesday. And Jesus and his disciples, they travel back into Jerusalem because they've spent the night in a nearby village called Bethany where they had some friends. So they're back in Jerusalem. They make their way back into the temple complex and they're walking around. And here comes this delegation, this group representing the highest level of religious leadership in Israel, a group from something called the Sanhedrin. These guys are a big deal, and they have a question for Jesus, and here it is. By what authority are you doing these things? They asked, and who gave you authority to do this? Now, you might be able to tell from the tone, there's no curiosity in this question. This is not a, hey, tell us. This is a, who do you think you are? What gives you the right? And when they talk about these things, what they're referring to, I believe, is a little earlier in the week, There was this incident in the temple where Jesus was flipping over tables and driving people out of the temple with a whip. And these were the currency exchangers. These were the people selling animals for sacrifices at marked up prices. And the religious leaders are unhappy about this because that was one of their ways of making money. You see, they were the leaders of the whole temple operation. And so they're just going, hey, what gives you the right to do this, to come in here and act like you own the place? And Jesus, just a tip, you don't want to get in a debate with Jesus. He's brilliant. And so what they're trying to do here is trap him, and he flips things around and begins to trap them. He goes, okay, I'll answer your question, but first you got to answer my question. And he says to them, John the Baptist, where did his authority come from? Now, John the Baptist was a hugely popular figure in Israel just before this time because he had been executed by one of the rulers, a guy by the name of Herod. But before he was executed, John was out at the Jordan River preaching and baptizing people. And it was like everybody was swarming to John, listening to him. He was like a hero of the people. But he got on the wrong side of Herod, and Herod had him killed. And Jesus goes to these religious leaders, hey, John's baptism, the message that he was preaching, the baptism deal, was that from heaven? Or did he just sort of like make that up? Was it from human origin? And so they begin to deliberate on how they're going to answer Jesus' question. Check this out. They discussed it amongst themselves. I'm picturing them just huddling up. What are we going to say to this guy? They discussed it amongst themselves, and they said, if we say from heaven, then he will ask, well, why didn't you believe him? Because they didn't. They never came out in support of this hugely popular figure. We can't say it's from heaven, so then they keep going. But if we say of human origin, he just made it up, they feared the people. For everyone held that John really was a prophet. These guys are going, we can't say he's from heaven. We can't say he made it up, or the people are going to freak out. And so what do they say? What's their answer? Highest level of religious leadership. We don't know. That's their answer. We don't know. And Jesus goes, well, then neither am I going to tell you by what authority I'm doing these things. He doesn't answer their question. Now, here's what's so frustrating and confusing. What was keeping these religious leaders, highly educated, knew the scriptures, what's keeping them from actually engaging this question? They can't even honestly process who John was or who Jesus is. What's keeping them from really listening here? And I think the answer is right in front of us. They feared the people. You see, the first reason that they could not listen to Jesus, and one of the reasons that we often don't listen to Jesus, is this word right here, fear. They were afraid. And what were they afraid of? The people? These guys, they were in leadership. And understand, they had position, they had power, they had prestige, they had money. But only as long as Rome was happy, because Rome, they were the true overlords of Israel. And if the people rose up, if they rioted, if the religious leaders lost control of the people, then the Romans would sweep in, bring order, and very likely remove the religious leaders. And so they're holding this very delicate balance. We got to keep the people happy. We've got to keep Rome happy. And they're afraid because they like their position, they like their power, they like their wealth. And so that fear keeps them from ever honestly asking, and who really is Jesus? And what if he does have authority? And friends, what I believe is true is that what kept them from honestly listening to Jesus is often what keeps us from honestly listening to Jesus. And so let me ask you an important question. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of that's keeping you from really, honestly hearing Jesus and giving him authority in your life? What are you afraid of? Maybe you're here today watching online and you've never been a person that would really call yourself a Christian. But here you are, and you find your heart and your mind opening to the possibility of Jesus in a way that you never have before. And you're just going, maybe he really is God's son. And maybe this book, the Bible, maybe it really is God's word. But if you go all in on Jesus, there's going to be some people that have a problem with that in your life. Mainly your husband, who is not a believer and is really not happy that you're even watching church. And that's scary. And so you're afraid. What are you afraid of that's keeping you from really listening to Jesus and giving him authority in your life? I wonder if you're a student and you want to listen to Jesus, you want to follow him, but just the way that people talk about Christians at school, judgmental, uncaring, and you're just afraid that you're going to get labeled, that you're going to get ridiculed. And so you're afraid of really living out your faith, really listening to Jesus. What are you afraid of? I wonder if you're afraid of rejection. Because if you're really going to listen to Jesus and let him call the shots in your life, you're going to have to tell somebody about what's really going on and what you're really struggling with. And what if they don't understand? And what if they judge you? What if they reject you? What are you afraid of that's keeping you from really hearing the voice of Jesus? You see, I just believe that when it comes to disobeying Jesus, if I could use that word, I don't think it's usually this blatant rebellion. I'm just going to do this, God, to spite you. I don't think that's usually how it works. I think we ignore Jesus. I think we disobey Jesus, often because we're afraid of something. Losing something, losing someone, or just the pain that we're afraid of going through because of following Jesus. And I just believe that faith looks a lot like trusting Jesus in the fear. And so again, what are you afraid of? And what if you just told him? What if you just said, God, I'm afraid right now? And what if you asked him for his help? God, I am afraid, and would you please help me to trust you in this fear? I believe that could be an incredibly powerful prayer in your life this week. God, I am afraid, but help me to trust you in the fear. And the thing is, following Jesus, bad news, it's always going to involve fear. Because Jesus calls us into things that are scary. But I believe you can trust him because he is good and he is for you. So God, I am afraid. Would you help me to trust you in the fear? Could be a powerful prayer in your life this week. So it's a conversation about authority and why sometimes we listen to Jesus and often we don't. These religious leaders, they come to Jesus. Where do you get this authority? Who do you think you are? And he sidesteps the question. And instead of answering them, he begins to tell them a story. Now, as we get into this story that Jesus tells, it might feel like everything's just kind of moving in a totally different direction. In fact, a whole nother chapter of Mark's gospel starts right here. But I'm telling you, these two things, the conversation and the story, they are connected. And what we're going to discover in this story is another reason why these religious leaders just were unable to listen to the voice of Jesus. And so check out this story with me in Mark chapter 12. Jesus then began to speak to them in parables. Now, a parable is a story with a teaching purpose. He has something important to communicate here, and he's using a story to do it. And this is something that Jesus did all the time. He was a masterful communicator. He says, a man planted a vineyard. He put a wall around it. He dug a pit for the winepress, and he built a tower. Then he rented the vineyard to some farmers, and then he moved away to a different place. So you got a guy who plants a vineyard, he puts a wall around it, he puts a wine press in so that they can make wine from the grapes, puts a tower, and then he rents it out to some farmers and pieces out to a different place. Now, this is again in the temple. Jesus is still talking to the religious leaders, and as he shifts into this story, I believe that they immediately went, he's talking about us. He's talking about Israel, and he's talking about us as leaders of Israel, because Jesus is using language, he's using imagery from the Old Testament, from the Jewish scriptures that they were so familiar with. It's from the prophet Isaiah. Chapter 5, there's this whole deal about Israel is a vineyard, and God is he blesses them by putting these walls and the winepress and all this. And so these three images are important. The walls around the vineyard to protect it from probably wild animals, and then the winepress. It's fully equipped. These guys that now rent this vineyard, understand, they're getting hooked up. They don't have to build anything. It's already planted. It even already has a wine press where they can stomp on the grapes and the juice will flow down and they can get into the process of making wine. There's even a watchtower to help protect them from bandits and robbers. And the idea is, look, renters, farmers, you are getting hooked up here. You are getting totally blessed with this really fantastic piece of real estate. And that was the story of Israel. When God rescued them out of slavery and gave them this land, it's like they didn't have to build houses. They didn't have to plant farms or vineyards. There were already cities. God just moved them in and gave them this incredible blessing. And so Jesus is telling this story about a vineyard, but it's really about Israel, and it's really about these religious leaders. And the story goes on. Verse 2, at harvest time, he, talking about the owner, because he moved away, he sent a servant to the tenants to collect from them some of the fruit of the vineyard. So he moves away, he sends a servant, hey, it's harvest time, I'm gonna gather some of these crops. And why would he do this? Well, it's fairly obvious, right? Because he owns it, right? It's his. This is his vineyard, and they're the renters, and he's just collecting his share of the crop. And as I read through the Old Testament, it's clear to me that the role that Israel had in God's land was to produce fruit, just like the parable. And the fruit that they were supposed to produce was faithfulness and loyalty to their God, to worship him only, and then also to be a blessing. I mean, way back to the beginning of the story of Israel, he blesses Abraham so that he can be a blessing to all people. They were supposed to be a blessing to all the people around them. That's the kind of fruit that they were to produce. And if you know the story of the Old Testament, they failed again and again and again, worshiping other gods and not producing the kind of fruit that God desired for them. And so at harvest time, as we said, he sends the servant to collect from them some of the fruit. But, verse 3, in Jesus' story, but they, the tenant farmers, they seized him, the servant. They beat him up, and they sent him away empty-handed. Then he sent another servant to them. They struck this man on the head and treated him shamefully. He sent still another, And that one they killed. He sent many others. Some of them they beat, others they killed. In this story, the owner sends servant after servant, and they are mistreated, disgraced, beaten up, and even killed. And it's like, what in the world is going on here? Why? How could they possibly do this? Why would they do this when they had been given this incredible vineyard, fully furnished, hooked up? And the answer is, why? Why would they do this? The answer is, they didn't want to be renters. They wanted to be the owners. I think they looked around at this property and they said, this is ours. Tower, that's ours. Walls, that's ours. Wine press, that's ours. They didn't want to be renters. What they wanted was this, control. And I think what Jesus is getting at here is one of the reasons that they just cannot listen to him, one of the reasons they're absolutely closed to the possibility of who he is they want to be in control. They want to call the shots. They want to be the owners. They don't want to be the renters. And this is what kept them from really listening to Jesus and opening their heart to him. And friends, this is often what keeps us from really opening our hearts to Jesus. Do you feel this in your heart? I do. I'll take you back to the doctor's office. I don't like being told what to do. You should exercise more. Well, no. We want to be in control. We want to call the shots. And there's something broken in each one of us that goes way back to the very first pages of the book of Genesis in the Bible. There is a brokenness that stems from Adam and Eve's rejection of God's authority. And what were they doing? No, we want to be in control. And that impacts every single one of us, and it keeps us from really listening to the voice of Jesus. I feel it. And I know you feel it as well. So what do you do about it? I want to be in control. What can you do about that as a Jesus follower? This story that Jesus is telling, it's about Israel. There's something about this story that's also about us. And so I'll take you back to these images. This blessed vineyard that they were given, hooked up with walls, a wine press, and a tower. Do you see these things in your life? Do you see the ways that God has blessed you and hooked you up? Let me explain what I mean. Here's a picture. You probably weren't expecting this. That's me, okay, late 70s, baby Aaron. A little something about me, and I promise this is going somewhere. I was born to some good parents, and I recognize that not all of us were blessed in this way, but I had a mom and a dad who loved me and took care of me and provided for me. And little something, I didn't pick my parents. I wasn't given a choice about it. I was just, boom, born to the parents that God picked. Something else about little baby Aaron is I was born in Blodgett Hospital in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I wasn't born in North Korea. I wasn't born in Ukraine, where there's a war going on. I was born in Michigan, in the United States of America, in the most prosperous and free country in the history of the world. And because of that, and like many of you, I have been given incredible opportunity and privilege. It's a blessing. Something else about baby Aaron is I was born with some talents and abilities. I'm decently intelligent, reasonably athletic, marginally athletic. There's some gifts, some natural abilities that I have. And again, I didn't pick them. I didn't choose them. I didn't pick my parents. I didn't pick a spot on the map where I wanted to be born. I didn't pick my abilities. I was just given them. Back to those three images. When I look at my life, I see the walls. I can see the wine press. I can see the watchtower. It's just ways that God blessed me and really kind of hooked me up. And so that's some of what this stuff looks like in my life. And I would ask you, where do you see the walls? Where do you see the wine press? And where do you see the watchtower? And do you recognize the blessings of God in your life? Now, let's talk again about this issue of control. What happened to Israel and what happens to us as we look around at these blessings that were given to us and we begin to say, that's mine. I did that. I'm the owner. And we forget our role. We reverse our role. It's supposed to be God is the owner and I am the renter. I am the steward of these resources. And we flip it and we say, I'm the owner. I'm in charge. My life. It's control. And so let me ask you a question. Your paycheck. You work hard all week long and you get paid. Owner or renter? Your weekend. You work hard all week long. You go to school all week long. You get a couple days off at the end of the week. That time, owner or renter? Your stuff, your home, your boat, the things that you have, your wardrobe, your tools. Owner or renter? Your abilities, your talents, your gifts, your ability to make people laugh, your ability to influence, your ability to make money. Owner or renter? And what happens with this issue of control is we get them flipped. And the truth is, some of us, even some of us who would call ourselves Christians, we have these areas of our lives where we are acting like the owners and we're renting to Jesus. This is mine, but you can have a little bit of it. Friends, that's not faith, that's control. And so why is it that there are times in our lives where we just don't listen to Jesus, just can't listen to Jesus, can't really give him authority? Oftentimes it's this issue right here, owner or renter. And this is where some of us are stuck. And we need a perspective change. Because the only way that you can ever really say, okay, everything I have, Jesus, everything that I am, Jesus, is yours. The only way we can ever say that is if we recognize, I'm the steward, I'm the renter, and he is the owner. It's a shift in perspective that can change everything. So it's a conversation about authority. Why sometimes we listen and why often we don't. And Jesus never answered the question, hey, what gives you the right? Where do you get your authority? And he just, whoop, and he tells the story. But now, in this story, he's going to answer the question of where his authority comes from. So again, in the story, the landowner, vineyard owner, he sends the servant to collect the share of the crops that are his because he owns the place. And what happens? They beat him up and they kill some of them. But here's where the story takes a shocking turn. He, the vineyard owner, had one left to send, a son whom he loved. He sent him last of all, saying, they will respect my son. To my knowledge, this is the only time that Jesus ever wrote himself into one of his parables. He's going, I'm the beloved son. I am the son, the one that the owner God sent. You want to know where my authority comes from? God's son sent to you. Now, there's something about this that we just have to stop for a second and recognize. And that is the absolute craziness of this. Because you would never do this. I would never do this. They beat up your servants, they kill your servants, and you send your son? It's crazy. is shocking. It's absolutely outrageous. It's reckless. And friends, don't ever lose that. That this is what God did for you. He sent his son into a rebellious and violent world to bring you home, to rescue you, to offer forgiveness and restoration. And friends, this is true no matter if you've been absolutely ignoring Jesus' words your entire life. These guys killed the servants, and he's just going, look, there can be forgiveness, there can be restoration. All you got to do, one thing you got to do right here, respect my son. Respect my son. But unfortunately, the third and final reason why these guys just couldn't listen to Jesus, and often why we don't either, is this right here, is respect. We don't actually respect Jesus for who he is. All you got to do is respect my son, and all will be forgiven. Everything will be restored. You can stay in the property and keep farming, but what happens? The tenants said to one another, this is the heir. This is our chance. Come, let's kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. We don't want to be renters. We want to be owners. And so they do it. So they took him, and they killed him, and they threw him out of the vineyard. And Jesus, 3 days from this story, would be dragged outside the walls of Jerusalem and crucified in a very disrespectful way. They refused to respect him. See, the reason often that we don't really listen to Jesus is an issue of respect. But what does respect look like? How do you respect someone? I think of a couple people in my life that I respect. I think of my dad. And again, I understand that you may not have a dad in your life. You may have a broken relationship with your dad. But I have a dad who, if he calls me and he has something to say to me, I listen to him because I respect him. Whether that's advice, whether that's encouragement, or whether that's correction, I listen to my dad because I respect him. Somebody else I respect is my wife in sort of a different way, because I promised her my faithfulness. I promised her my heart in a way that I would never give to somebody else. And so respect with her looks a lot like loyalty. She's somebody that I deeply respect. These two people are hugely important, and they occupy critical roles, important roles in my life. But Jesus, the creator, the sustainer of life, the one who holds all things together, God's son, the one who came for me, how do you respect someone like that? What does respecting Jesus look like? This is a whole other level. What does that look like? Well, Jesus gives us an image. At the end of this parable, he's quoting again Jewish scriptures, Old Testament, this time from Psalm 118. He says, the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in our eyes. The stone, this is Jesus, the stone the builders rejected, and he would be. I mean, as he wraps up this parable, the religious leaders are walking away going, we've got to arrest him, we've got to take him out, we've got to kill him. He will be rejected, he will be crucified, but God is making him the cornerstone. And what's a cornerstone? I mean, these days, a cornerstone in a building, it's like a decorative brick that's like, this building was built in 1952. But back then, ancient construction, the cornerstone was the most important piece, the most important block in a structure, because it had to be perfect. It had to be perfectly square. It had to be perfectly level. It had to be exactly the right size, because everything in that structure would be built on and built around that block. And it's like what's being said here is Jesus, though he will be rejected, understand Everything that God is doing and everything that God will do in the future will be built on Jesus. He is the central piece. He is the most important person that there is. How do you respect somebody like that? I think it's the image. You make him the cornerstone of your life. The only place that Jesus deserves is the absolute center, the cornerstone, where you're building everything on and around him. If you want to respect Jesus for everything that he is, that is really the only response that qualifies. Make him everything that you're building your life on and around. And I just know from my life, when I am struggling to listen to Jesus, why am I not actually following him? It's usually because I'm building on something else. I've allowed something else to become that central piece, that cornerstone. And so let me ask you, is there something else that you're building on? Security? It's just that need to be safe, to be settled, and maybe that's financial security, career security, relationship security. Is there something else that you're building on? What people think about you, approval, status. Is there something else that you're building on? That your life is becoming all about achievement, maybe? The next thing, the next level, the promotion, whatever it is. I just know that when I'm struggling to listen to Jesus honestly and give him authority, it's often because I've allowed something else to become the cornerstone. I'm building everything on and around something else other than Jesus. And so respecting Jesus, the only way to really do that is to make him the cornerstone of everything in your life. And so let's wrap up with this question. Where are you struggling to listen to Jesus? I wonder if it's fear that's causing you to close your heart to him. I wonder if it's this issue of control. I wonder if it's because you're building on something else. And my hope for you, as we've explored this story about the religious leaders and this confrontational conversation with Jesus, my hope for you is that you might go, that's what it is. That's where I'm really struggling, that it might reveal something for you, that you could get unstuck. And my desire for you is that you might be able to identify that and invite Jesus into that, because I just believe that when we open our hearts to him and really listen and give him authority in our lives, that is when we really begin to experience the life that Jesus desires for us. And so as we close our time, I'd love to pray for you. Heavenly Father, conversation about the authority of your Son inevitably hits that broken place inside of all of us where we just want to be in control. And God, some of us are just afraid right now. Some of us are wrestling. Some of us are realizing, man, we've been building on something else. God, would you give us the courage to trust you? Would you help us to really give you authority in our lives? And God, would you bless us? Would we be able to experience the life that you desire as we surrender more and more control to you? God, we love you, and we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Hey, I'm so grateful that we had some time together today. Just look forward to next week as we continue on this series. We'll see you next time.